Next on Rugby Wrap-Up, the man behind the must-see documentary exposing Pacific Island rugby corruption, world rugby apathy, and Tier 1 nation greed, Daniel Leo. Rugby Wrap-Up brought to you in part by The Pig and Whistle, the world's best rugby pub. The Murphy Kennedy Group, founded with the idea that construction can be done better. And Lean and Limber, stretching your way to a healthier lifestyle. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Rugby Wrap-Up. Matt McCarthy in Midtown Manhattan. Thank you for joining us once again, and I have the pleasure of being joined by my colleague on the Upper West Side and often co-host, Mr. Stephen Lewis, the reigning two-time USA Rugby Coach of the Year and current General Manager of Rugby United New York when he is not in charge of the Jamaica Sevens program, both male and female. He's on the Upper West Side and calling in from Brisbane, a man that is we're not worthy to have on this show, Mr. Daniel Leo. You might recognize him from his playing days, a Samoa legend, but also he's had a great professional career, which we'll get to in a moment. But I just wanted to welcome Daniel. It's great to have you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks for having me immensely.
Dan, just quickly, your playing career before we get into the real reason why you're on here. Not that we couldn't just be talking about your playing career. Starting with the Queensland Reds Academy and a handful of matches with the Queensland Reds. Then it was on to London Wasps, Bordeaux, Perpignan, I'm butchering that, London Irish, London Welsh, and of course, your 39 caps for Samoa. But it is your exceptional documentary, Oceans Apart, Grief, Betrayal, and Pacific Island Rugby, that has you here today.
The reason there will be no change is because the people who stand to lose from change have all the power. And the people who stand to gain from change have none of the power. This sums up the game of rugby today.
We actually play games where we get nothing from it. That is ridiculous.
You know, my resume, my rugby playing resume probably makes me sound a little bit better than I actually was, which probably was common sense that I was expendable to the team and an obvious person to bring forth some of the issues that we had with our own union. You know, losing me for speaking out wasn't probably as bad as losing some of those other key players, Alessandro Tuilangi, for instance. Yeah, it is what it is. Really excited to have the film, and thanks for watching it. First and foremost, hope you paid for it 3 times, Matt.
Amazon Prime.
That'll definitely make it was on Prime. Okay, fair enough.
Amazon Prime. I'm not. This is one of the few things I haven't pirated. Steve, it's always these guys that are humble, right? 39 caps, international team, professional career, but he's doing something special down there. And when you talked about speaking out, getting and basically spilling the beans, so to speak, and getting released from the team, why don't you explain that?
Yeah, it's a catch-22 really when it comes to playing for Pacific Island Rugby. Is this the proximity of our politicians and our senior politicians, and also that respect culture that is ingrained into us. You don't question authority even when you see things are wrong. There's a very a real stigma against questioning elders in our community. So when you do that, you can be it's very countercultural for us and very, very difficult for us. Unfortunately, the result was for making these kinds of stands while I was a player was that I didn't play any more rugby for the national side, and not just myself. There were a number of players that went before me who were tarnished with the same brush. Mohonri Shuoga, who was our captain in 2011, questioned the whereabouts of millions of dollars that we had raised publicly. The answers weren't forthcoming, but again, he was cut from the.
So I think really to frame it for perhaps your viewers, that there are 2 issues, and Dan, jump in and correct me here at any time. Mm-hmm. The treatment of the Pacific nations by the governing body World Rugby and by other unions, the home unions, and particularly New Zealand and Australia, in terms of using talent, extracting talent. And then the second issue which comes out is what Dan is alluding to there, whereby those island unions, Tonga, Fiji, and Samoa, their administrations have been by no means pure. fair to say.
You've hit the nail on the head there, Steve. And actually, the byproduct of those two issues coming together is, the ones that lose out are the current players in the, in both in the national teams, but also the players at Grassroots who have no options but to leave their parents, leave their families due to the lack of infrastructure there that is a result of those two forces coming together, and the lack of resources, but also lack of professional pathways and opportunity that's there for them. So unfortunately it's a tough one, because as I journey through, and it was we try and give a balanced opinion on both of those issues by providing and that was one of the key things with the documentary that we wanted to do. We didn't want it to come to be my opinions as a player and my experiences. Actually, it was important that we delve deeper than that, because as a players we just always lump to that blame, I guess, on our own politicians. Those are the ones that were visible. They were easier to. It was easier to see what was it was all right in front of us in terms of what was going missing, the embezzlement of funds, etc. But what we didn't probably quite realise was this overarching issue with the system that probably needs to be addressed if there's to be any change moving forward.
2014, Twickenham. You guys were about to play England, Samoa, and you hadn't gotten any money. You hadn't gotten paid, even basics, and you guys were going to strike. And then you were assured that you would get paid, that it would be all hunky-dory. That wasn't the case. You played the game, and then a couple of you rang the bell and got cut because you opened your mouths, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's as I said, it is really tough. And Tonga's the same, actually. Tonga, the Prime Minister is very close to the unions. The difficulty, I guess, is we are small countries. Tonga's only 100,000, 110,000 people. Samoa's 250,000. So naturally, the proximity of the politicians is going to be a bit closer anyway to our unions. But we need to be able to move away from that model, Matt, if we're going to make change, because there is a bit of political ragdoll that rugby's been used for. The politicians know that our people love rugby. They live and breathe rugby. So if they can control, the rugby unions, they control hearts and minds of the people.
The other part of it is that you're a big guy, right? You've played a lot of rugby. You're not afraid of a little contact or whatever. But you could tell that you were wary or intimidated somewhat, and probably rightfully so, of going to talk to your Prime Minister / Chairman about this malfeasance, if you will, because there was $1 million that went unaccounted for, and then you're going to go talk to him because you had spoken out about it, and then he kind of charms you on film, and you do say you might have been charmed by that. I'm just wondering, and I get this all the time, did you let him off too easy? Well,
obviously there's a cultural context, and we had to do it respectfully, because I knew that my parents being from Samoa and still living there at the time, and my other family members, I don't want to make life too hard on them by me coming across and really and also we want to work with these people moving forward. I think that's part of the answer, is a collaborative approach. So but yeah, I think definitely the other thing was it was actually I went to his office, and 5 minutes before we're about to do the interview, he said that he didn't want to do it anymore. And actually the only way I could do the interview with him, it wasn't a normal interview style, questions going back and forth like we're having now. It was actually he had all my questions printed out in front of him, and I actually didn't ask him any of the questions that I had. He cherry picked the ones that he wanted to answer, and there was two government employees standing just off camera, making sure that I towed the line, that I didn't get too pushy within that interview. So it probably was a little bit biased in that respect, and it meant that I couldn't ask the hunky dories of some of the questions that I really wanted to nail them on. But hopefully within that, it still works. I think I was equally uncomfortable with the amount of statues of Jesus he had around all around him. That it was staring back at me as well. It made me feel very very unholy.
Yeah. Steve, in comparison, in Fiji, the prime minister became prime minister in a military coup, right? So you were interviewing another player, a Fijian player, and he was talking about how, yeah, Frank, I'm not gonna mess with Frank, right?
Yeah, I mean, speaking truth to power is never easy, right? Even for us here. So, Dan, you're to be commended. And I've actually been following you a little bit since that initial Samoa game at Twickenham. And you've been pretty outspoken. You're to be commended for speaking up for your fellow players and players from that region. Just to flip it back to the World Rugby thing, talking about speaking truth to power. I mean, I thought Gosper did not come out of that film well. As a coach of Jamaica's Sevens, I get the same thing all the time about World Rugby growing the game. And they're paying lip service. They're in cahoots. The fact that Pacific Island players can go to European clubs and they're more incentivized not to play for their country, to play for that French club or that English club, is a nonsense. It's exploitation. And World Rugby know it. They pay lip service to reform, but nothing ever happens. It's depressing, to be honest. And so I think your film does a good job exposing this to a wider audience. What's the mechanism, do you think, whereby World Rugby money can be honestly invested and honestly used in Fiji, Samoa and Tonga, given the current situation?
I think the strategy that they've got in place with the high performance units in terms of professional, the professional side of the game has actually got scope to work, where they have fully qualified personnel administering any World Rugby funds that are coming in and signing off on any expenditure as per the tier 1 nations around the world. The similar models being adopted there, and we're starting to see the fruits of that. Simon Rawalui is in that role in Fiji Rugby now and doing an incredible job. And look where Fiji are. Out of the 3 Pacific Island nations, they're the ones that have made remarkable steps over the last probably 4 or 5 years. But yeah, it's got to be. It's a bit about that. But for me, it's how do we actually invest this money into the grassroots? Because that's where the difficulty is that you go to Samoa and Tonga and there's no junior rugby there until you start high school. So until you hit 12 years old, you're not playing in any competitive games, not learning any of the technical side. You might have played a fair bit of beach rugby and backyard rugby, but nothing structured. So that's, for me, is where the base of the pyramid that needs to be invested in if we're going to actually raise the top of that pyramid, figuratively speaking. So how's that done? For me, it's the experienced guys going back, setting up in the islands and actually getting into those administrative roles. But also, there's got to be more money in the pot to go around in the first place, because a lot of the time those roles are volunteer roles. And with volunteers, and this is the issue that came up when I spoke to the Samoan Rugby Union.
So the high performance money, you're quite confident that it's now being channeled correctly and appropriately. That's good to know. In Fiji it is. Samoa and Tonga, Samoa's getting better as we learned through the film. Tonga's still got its struggles, and that's largely to do with a CEO that was there as an interim, supposedly for 6 months, who maintained the helm of power for 4 years, and the fact that World Rugby funding has been frozen to Tonga up until very recently due to ongoing governance concerns. So for me, that's again, it's those incentives. If there's no money there to be embezzled, then the wrong people will step away for in time. So yeah, it comes back to to more definitive approaches from World Rugby, I think, and actually being willing to hold these countries to account. Because as Brett Gosper said, the fact that they can't hold prime ministers of countries to account, and there are people involved for the wrong reasons.
is, for me, if it's a governing body, they've got to have the remit to be able to go in there and actually, have some teeth and sort the situation out. It can't be that we're just going to allow, these countries to be sovereign unions and drown themselves at the same time.
But here's a couple of points. As an American looking at this, you guys don't have to go through the process of introducing kids to the game of rugby, which is what we have to do here. So for me, the fact that it's just cash and you don't need a lot of it is inexcusable that you guys aren't getting this kind of backing, some kind of backing whatsoever. The United States, we have a bigger task. We have an enormous country, geographically and geopolitically enormous, and we have kids that don't know rugby that we have to introduce. So there's that part of the pyramid for us. Well, I'm looking at you guys, and everybody is passionate, and in their respective villages, they all want to play rugby. It's a no-brainer. And
it is.
It's just, it is. Again, it gets back to that turkeys voting for Thanksgiving, right? You're the farm team. If it's Major League Baseball or the NHL, this is a farm system for the tier ones.
Yeah, not just the tier one now, Matt. We're seeing it more and more around the world. Spain now is the largest recruiter of Pacific Island, non-cap Pacific Island players. Romania as well. I was in Romania filming, and there was one team that I went and visited there who had 9 Fijian players in one side. So I guess it's the crux of what you're getting to is yes, we are rugby playing nations, and let's hope we stay that way. But there are a lot more tier 2 and 3 nations who probably wouldn't be necessarily see them as rugby playing as rugby being their national sports, who want to get to that status. And as you say, we are a conveyor belt of talents in their eyes to develop their national programs and competitions very quickly, because you can get a finished near finished product for next to no money. So it's a bit about that as the game develops, part of the film, but the wider objective of Pacific Rugby Players Welfare as an organisation is protecting those young players and that next generation of players coming through, as hopefully a rugby state goes from strength to strength as a world game and as a professional sport.
I probably should have mentioned that you're with the Pacific Rugby Players Welfare Organization, right? Is that the actual name of it? And you guys are doing great work. I mean, you just mentioned Romania. You saved a guy and got him his kidney, right?
Yeah, it's. There's always lots of work to do there. We've got we represent over 600 players worldwide now. A few of those actually who are starting to play in the MLR competitions as well, who we want to support. We've actually got two American reps on our board, and Andrew Duratalo and Suniula and Shalom.
Which of the flying Suniula brothers did you?
Shalom it is, yeah. So they bring a great wealth of experience to our board, and we wanted to add those guys. And before you guys get to a position where you're like Europe, where we're behind the 8 ball and trying to catch up with a lot of the issues that affect our community. And in those two guys, they bring a huge amount of not just experience but mana, respect in the game. Amongst our community. So it was key that we got a bit of in front of the 8 ball there in the States. But the reality is that that's what's in places like France and Italy, like you mentioned, Steve. It's already too late. We're constantly we've got no way of knowing how who's there, how many players are there, who's there with their families until they arrive. And so we'd like to be a bit more proactive, hopefully, with the way that the game's going in the States and how that develops. But in Europe, it's still very, very tough times ahead.
All right, guys, we have to take a quick break.
Been blind since I was 4, and I've never seen a beer commercial or a beer label. None of that stuff influences me. I drink beer because of the taste, and my beer is Pabst Blue Ribbon. It has the taste and the flavor.
What do you think's on the label?
I think there's a naked woman riding on a unicorn, jumping over fire. Oh, that's good beer.
If you're in New York City and want to watch some great rugby, have some great food, and some great times, go to the world's best rugby pub, the Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street.
Here at Segra Field for what we're calling the first look, to give our fans a look at our new stadium where Old Glory will be playing in 2021 and beyond. Segra Field, just east of Leesburg, Virginia.
Now, Chris, I heard that there was a list of people that are prohibited from coming to games ever at the Old Glory Stadium. Can you tell us about that list and who is on it?
Absolutely. Everybody in America knows there are some rugby players you just don't want at your rugby game. Top of the list has got to be Matt McCarthy. I don't think we're ever going to let that guy in anything we do.
Good idea. Good idea.
Thank you.
And we are back. Matt McCarthy, Steve Lewis, and Daniel Leo calling in from Brisbane. Stephen, you have to go soon. So what was it that you needed to speak about?
And I'm bursting to say, I think, one of the quick fixes that World Rugby could address, and very quickly, is to adopt Olympic eligibility and adopt citizenship. One of the reasons Pacific players are getting identified, recruited, and taken away young to be project players in other countries. Okay, and then you have these guys playing for their countries. Fine for them individually and for their families. We get the economic reasons. But in the Olympics, it's simple. Citizenship. If you're not a citizen, you can't play for that country. And Scotland, my country, are as guilty as anyone with South African project players. But if World Rugby, that's a very quick fix that Pichot wanted to make. He extended it from 3 years to 5 years, but he didn't win out. Beaumont won out. So World Rugby does have the ability to change some of these conditions that could impact us very quickly, and that's one of them. So that was kind of, I just feel very passionate about that one.
Yeah, I agree, Steve. You know, there's lots of questions that we raise around citizenship, and we need to be, you know, as a sport, we need to be reflective of what society is these days. And a lot of people look. You're a Scot living in the States. I'm a Samoan Kiwi living in Australia. I'm sure you've got some heritage, Matt. You're probably, you know, what's your heritage? But you know, this
McCarthy,
is the thing.
I'm Irish.
You're Irish, eh? Yeah. So nobody's one thing anymore. You know.
Here's my point. If you stop it at source, how do you make the domestic infrastructure in those countries good enough? Do you have a team in Super Rugby? Do you have a team in the MLR? Those are the ways forward, I think. Those are the solutions. Hey, gents, I'm going to jump. Dan, I could speak all day, mate. Listen, keep up the good work. You're doing a good job. It's a great film. And Matt, I'll catch you later, pal. Sorry I have to go.
No problem. Go do your thing.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for stopping in, Steve.
Cheers. Bye.
For me, the eligibility issue is a secondary to some of the other issues that need addressing first. You know, this mention of a homecoming law and allowing players to go back and play at the end of their careers. It's going to be a quick term fix maybe in certain situations, but you know, if we can stop those guys, you know, if we can create a level playing field which makes it equally as lucrative to play for Samoa or the All Blacks, for instance, you know, how many of those players might play for their Pacific Island heritage?
But a couple of stunning points for me out of the documentary was when you were sitting there with Brett Gosper. And I met Brett, nice guy. But I was insulted for you when he laughed about the voting equality issue of how maybe tier 2 nations could get more of a say in the boardroom with maybe not sharing 9 votes amongst 1,000 countries. Right, and have a little bit more of a say, and he's, you know, not on my watch.
Maybe not while I'm here, but
but that was one thing, and then the idea about, hey, how about 10% of the gate for a tier 2 nation at a tier 1 match, because they don't come to our nations, A, and play, and B, we don't get a dime when we go over there. You know, your perfect example is Samoa playing at Twickenham guys who are getting 20K or 20,000 pounds, and you guys get $800 if you get it. You know, I was the media manager for Team USA. I know what those guys got. They got $125 a game. Yeah. Right. And, you know, on the other side of the fence, they're playing England, or I was at 2 years ago as a civilian, I went to see Team USA play Ireland at a sold-out Aviva Stadium in Dublin. And Team USA didn't get any money for that.
That's crazy. Yeah.
It's insane. And his answer was even more ridiculous. Oh, well, it's kind of up to the host nation. And, we can't really do anything. Yeah, you can. You can do something. And to say that on camera that you can't do anything is really disingenuous. And it's your patience with him was remarkable.
Well, again, Matt, it was important that we were, no matter how infuriating some of the answers we got, and all the interviews, we had to maintain this respect. It was important that this was the Pacific Island rugby story told in our way and told within our cultural norms. So yeah, it's not the, I know if there was other presenters, they probably would have fired quick shot, questions back and really held them to account on some of those things. But yeah, for me, you bring an important point up, because it was unsatisfactory, particularly the answer on the influence on that board, and the fact that so many countries have so little influence. But not just that, Matt, is the fact that a lot of those, that 3-vote status is unachievable for all nations. And if we're going to actually, say that we're a sport of equality, fairness, and inclusivity, then we've got to start living that. And if there's systematic issues which stop that from happening, we've got to get rid of them. We've got to be able to look at ourselves retrospect. As much as we love this game, we all love this game, we want it to get better. And the way we get it better is by holding, our governing bodies to account. And, like anybody, Brett Gosper, Bill Sweeney at the RFU, our Prime Minister, some that they have to be reflective of the needs and the wishes of the rugby public. So the onus is on us, and that was why we wanted to make the film and get it out there, was hopefully to educate our the rugby public to be able to affect change and put pressure on guys like Bill Beaumont and the rugby administrations to affect positive change for where we want to take this great sport.
I thought Pichot did a great job, despite the fact that he lost. He didn't just accept the vice chairman position. He ran against the chairman, right, and brought up some issues. And it takes guys like that, takes guys like you. And, credit to you, because you're not a trained presenter. You're not you did this on your own. People that are going to give you a hard time about not asking the hard questions, they have no idea what it's like to be in that situation. I have an inkling of what that's like. In asking difficult questions face to face, one-on-one, and you got two people standing over your shoulder. They don't get it, but this is it's a huge step. It's not a small step. It's a huge step forward, and I congratulate you on it.
Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah, no, I was probably a pretty unlikely character. I'm not the most well-spoken or quick-witted of guys, but I had experiences and I had a passion to bring these issues to light. So hopefully that comes across okay, mate. I appreciate you having me and promoting the film, because we do want positive change to come from it. And hopefully, if anything, it's just inspired some positive discussion around all of these issues. But we need results to come from this, and there's been a lot of talk over the years about how we can get the best out of the Pacific Islands and do the best by them, but it is real time for change, Matt. So let's hope that this can be part of the part of that solution.
Well, I think the simple solution is to get some big corporate dollars to build academies that have actually very good schools in the countries and keep the kids in the countries.
Yeah, that'd be nice. If you've got any connections to Dwayne Johnson over there, proud Samoan.
I'll dial up the rock.
Samoan rugby for the next century.
Well, we'll certainly get him. We'll hammer him on this with on Twitter. Certainly, maybe get him in there. But it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on, sir. And I urge everyone to watch and actually pay for and not pirate Oceans Apart: Greed, Betrayal, and Pacific Rugby.
Thanks heaps, Matt. Really appreciate that. That was great. Thanks for asking and going places where people probably don't want to sometimes go. It's a bit uncomfortable, but it's got to be said, doesn't it? On embarking on this whole project, mate. I'm probably the most hated person in World Rugby offices at the moment. But hey, one day hopefully that will change, and we might get back invited, mate, back into the fold.
Circle, right? Yeah. All right. We'll make a new circle.
Yeah. True. Yeah, let's do that.
On that
Appreciate
note, on behalf of Mr. Daniel Leo, I'm Matt McCarthy for Rugby Wrap Up, signing off.